Imagine a sky that is no longer blue but a bruised canvas of crimson and black, split open by veins of fire. The ground beneath your feet, once solid and dependable, now trembling without end, groaning as if the world itself is in its final agony. Great cities with temples that once kissed the clouds now fold into the earth like paper, and from the horizon the ocean, which for millennia was a giver of life, rises into an impossible wall of dark water, a liquid mountain moving with unnatural speed, coming not to cleanse but to erase. In a single terrible night, a continent larger than South America, home to 64 million souls, is swallowed by fire and sea, vanishing from the face of the earth forever. What if this is not a scene from a work of fiction? What if it is not a myth, but a memory, the deeply buried traumatic memory of all humanity, echoing down through thousands of years? Good evening. Welcome to Simply About Earth, where we explore the whispers from our forgotten past. Today we're diving into one of history's most captivating mysteries, the lost continent of Mu. Before we begin this incredible journey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our global community come together to explore these ancient enigmas. For what follows this cataclysm is a silence in our history books that lasts for thousands of years, and when the story of humanity seems to begin again, it does so in a strangely sophisticated and disconnected way. Suddenly, pyramids of astonishing precision rise in Egypt. Advanced calendars are carved into stone in Mesoamerica, and across the vast Pacific, Polynesian navigators chart the stars with a knowledge that seems far too old for their time. Mainstream history tells us these were all independent sparks of genius, but the legend of Mu offers a different, more haunting explanation. They were the fragmented legacies of the survivors, refugees from a drowned world who carried pieces of their magnificent, lost knowledge to the far corners of the earth. If a world was truly lost, if a civilization that formed the very bedrock of our own was swallowed by the sea, would any trace of it remain? Would the relentless currents of 10,000 years grind every temple to dust, every city to sand? Our history books are written on the assumption that what lies on dry land is the sum of our story, but the land is only 30% of our world. The rest is the ocean, the least explored, most mysterious part of our own planet. And it is there, in the abyssal depths, that we must begin our search. Our first destination takes us to the far western edge of the Pacific, to the Ryukyu Islands of Japan. It was here in 1986 that a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake was scouting the waters off the coast of Yonaguni. He was looking for a new place to observe hammerhead sharks when he saw something that made him pause, something that did not belong in the wild, untamed geometry of the natural world. Rising from the seabed 90 feet below the surface was a monolith of staggering size and impossible shape. It was a single immense block of sandstone nearly 500 feet long and 130 feet wide, and it appeared to have been carved, shaped, and terraced with intelligent intention. This structure, now known as the Yonaguni Monument, has become one of the most polarizing mysteries in modern archaeology. To those who see the hand of humanity in its form, it is nothing less than a sunken city, a remnant of a civilization of unimaginable antiquity. They point to its most striking features with a sense of awe. There are vast flat terraces that end in perfectly vertical drops. There are shapes that look uncannily like immense staircases ascending the side of the monolith, as if meant for giants. One area, nicknamed the main terrace, is a broad, flat platform that looks for all the world like a ceremonial stage or the foundation of a great temple. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, has spent decades studying the site, convinced that it is artificial. He has claimed to identify not only architectural features, but also what he interprets as tool marks left in the stone, drainage channels, and even a primitive form of rock art resembling animals and human faces. In his vision, Yonaguni was a coastal acropolis, part of a larger city that was submerged by a massive earthquake and tsunami thousands of years ago. long before the first stones were laid at Giza. Could nature, with its random forces of erosion and tectonic stress, truly carve with such precision? Could it create 90-degree angles and symmetrical patterns on such a monumental scale? To its proponents, the answer is a firm and resounding no. This, they insist, is the work of a lost culture. Yet for every argument in favor of its artificial origin, there is a sober and compelling scientific counterargument. Geologists, most notably Dr. Robert Schoch of Boston University, have studied the monument and come to a very different conclusion. They point out that the entire structure is composed of fine-grained Miocene sandstone, a type of rock that is known for its tendency to fracture along very straight, clean planes. The region is tectonically active, subject to constant earthquakes and immense pressure. Over millennia, this pressure can cause the rock to split in a grid-like pattern, creating the very right angles and flat surfaces that look so man-made. And so we are left with a profound paradox: 90 feet beneath the waves, a structure that looks designed yet is explained by geology, an arrangement of stone that feels sacred yet is attributed to the blind forces of the planet. Is it simply a trick of the light and the mind, our innate human tendency to see patterns and intention where none exist? Or is it something more, a whisper from a time so distant, a culture so alien to our own that we can no longer even recognize its handiwork for what it is? Our search for these underwater traces now takes us halfway around the world, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, off the coast of a small island in the Bahamas called Bimini. For the pattern of submerged stone structures is not confined to one ocean. It is a global phenomenon, and each new discovery adds another layer to the question of what our planet might have looked like in the deep past. It was in 1968 that divers exploring the shallow, crystal-clear waters off the north shore of Bimini came across an astonishing sight. Lying in just 18 feet of water was what appeared to be a road, a pavement, or the foundation of a massive wall, stretching for nearly half a mile, in a perfectly straight line before curving gently into a J shape. This feature, known as the Bimini Road, is composed of hundreds of massive, roughly rectangular limestone blocks, some as large as 16 feet across. They are fitted together with a precision that seems to defy natural explanation. The discovery caused an immediate sensation, in part because it seemed to fulfill a prophecy by the American psychic Edgar Cayce, who had predicted that remnants of the lost city of Atlantis would be discovered in that very area in 1968 or 1969. For decades, the Bimini Road became a focal point for those searching for lost civilizations. However, just as with Yonaguni, the scientific community has offered a detailed and persuasive natural explanation. Geologists have identified the stones of the Bimini Road as a classic example of beach rock, a type of sedimentary rock that forms naturally in the intertidal zone, right where the waves break on a beach. In this zone, sand, shells, and other debris can become cemented together by calcium carbonate that precipitates out of the seawater. This process creates a hard, flat pavement that perfectly mirrors the shape of the original coastline. A road that leads from nowhere to nowhere, built by the patient forces of nature, yet mirroring the very patterns of a human harbor wall. Is it a mere coincidence, a geological illusion that happens to fool our pattern-seeking eyes? Or does the ocean sometimes remember how we build, and in its own slow geological time, mimic our forgotten creations? From a possible road in the Atlantic, our journey must now take us to a potential city off the coast of India, into the murky waters of the Gulf of Cambay. This discovery is perhaps the most profound, the most challenging to our established timeline of history, and also the most uncertain. In 2001, India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was conducting a routine survey of the seafloor, mapping pollution in the Gulf. But their side-scan sonar equipment began to pick up something completely unexpected. Deep beneath the waves, in water over 100 feet deep, the sonar painted a picture of immense geometric structures, regularly spaced and stretching for over 5 miles. The images seemed to show the foundations of a massive city. Subsequent dredging operations in the area brought up a collection of artifacts that stunned the researchers. They recovered pieces of pottery, beads, sections of fossilized wood, and even human teeth and bones. The real shock came when a piece of the recovered wood was sent for carbon dating. The result came back 9,500 years old. If this date is accurate, and if the artifact is truly associated with the underwater structures, then this city would predate the oldest known cities of Mesopotamia and Egypt by more than 4,000 years. It would completely rewrite our understanding of when and where urban civilization began. It would suggest the existence of a highly advanced culture at the end of the last ice age, a culture that history has no record of, a culture that could, in theory, be a candidate for one of the lost colonies of Mud, founded by survivors of the Great Cataclysm. Yet this discovery, for all its revolutionary potential, is shrouded in deep controversy. The Gulf of Cambay is known for its incredibly powerful and turbulent tidal currents, some of the strongest in the world. Geologists argue that these currents could easily carve natural rock formations that appear geometric on sonar scans. Yonaguni, Bimini, Cambay. 3 different oceans, 3 similar mysteries, each a silent, stony Rorschach test on the ocean floor. We see in them what we are prepared to see, the hand of nature or the ghost of a forgotten world. Are these simply isolated geological quirks, strange but meaningless coincidences scattered across the globe, or are they the faint, eroded footprints of a single global maritime culture? If you're enjoying this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries so far, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to explore more incredible stories like this one. For what if the most profound evidence for a lost global civilization is not hidden on the ocean floor, but has been standing in plain sight all along, its true meaning simply forgotten? What if the greatest wonders of the ancient world are not isolated achievements, but connected nodes in a vast and intricate system, a planetary network of energy and information whose power source has vanished into the sea? In the early 1900s, an English antiquarian named Alfred Watkins was riding his horse through the hills of Herefordshire. As he looked out across the landscape, dotted with ancient mounds, stone circles, and old churches, he was struck by a sudden revelation. It seemed to him that these ancient sites were not scattered randomly, but were arranged in perfectly straight lines that crisscrossed the entire countryside. He called these alignments ley lines. What began as a local observation in the English countryside soon grew into a breathtaking global hypothesis. Researchers began drawing lines across world maps, connecting the most significant and enigmatic sites of antiquity, and a stunning pattern began to emerge. A straight line drawn from the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt passes directly through the ancient temple complex of Baalbek in Lebanon and onward to the ruins of Persepolis in Persia. Another line connects the magnificent Sun Temple of Konark in India with the sacred sites of Angkor Wat in Cambodia and the mysterious Plain of Jars in Laos. The connections grew bolder, spanning entire oceans. The Great Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, Mexico, was found to lie on a direct alignment with the stone circles of Stonehenge in England, separated by 5,000 miles of land and sea. And Easter Island, that most remote and lonely outpost of megalithic culture, was found to be a nexus point, aligning with other sacred sites across the Pacific and into the mountains of the Andes. Suddenly, the world's ancient wonders no longer seemed like the isolated works of disconnected cultures. They appeared to be elements of a single unified design, a planetary grid of immense scale and precision. The builders of Giza in this vision were not strangers to the builders of Teotihuacan. They were working from the same map, the same celestial blueprint, the same lost science of place and power. But every symphony has its discordant notes, and the planetary grid has a dark and dangerous side. In the 1960s and 70s, the biologist Ivan T. Sanderson began to investigate a series of strange disappearances of ships and aircraft around the world. As he plotted these incidents on a map, he discovered that they were not random. They seem to be concentrated in 12 specific areas, which he dubbed the vile vortices. Two of these vortices are infamous, etched into our popular culture as bywords for unexplained mystery. The first, of course, is the Bermuda Triangle, located off the southeastern coast of the United States. This stretch of the Atlantic is the legendary graveyard of countless ships and planes. The story of Flight 19 is perhaps the most famous. On a clear afternoon in 1945, 5 United States Navy torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training mission. They were never seen again. The second great vortex lies on the opposite side of the planet, in the waters south of Japan, an area known as the Devil's Sea, or the Dragon's Triangle. Like its Atlantic counterpart, this region has a long and dark history of swallowing vessels. Between 1952 and 1954 alone, Japan officially lost 5 military vessels in this area, prompting the government to declare it a danger zone. If this planetary grid with its sacred sites and its dangerous vortices is a real phenomenon, who built it and what was its original power source? The sheer scale of the system suggests a civilization with a global reach and a profound understanding of physics and cosmology far beyond anything our history books admit to. This is where the legend of Mu returns to the center of our story. Proponents of the grid theory propose that this entire system was the work of the lost civilization of Mu. The Great Pyramids and stone circles were not just markers, they were functional devices. They were harmonic resonators, energetic amplifiers, and planetary acupressure needles designed to tap into, channel, and stabilize the natural life force of the planet for the benefit of all life. In this breathtaking vision, Mu was not just a continent. It was the central processing unit of a living technological planet. It was the heart of the system, the nexus from which all the lines of power emanated. And its destruction 12,000 years ago was not just the loss of a landmass. It was a catastrophic blow to the entire global grid. The power source was extinguished. The heart stopped beating. The network was thrown into chaos, its energies running wild and unchecked. Of course, we must pause and allow the quiet voice of modern science to offer its perspective. Mainstream science has never found any measurable evidence for the existence of ley lines or a global energy grid. Geologists explain that the Earth's magnetic field has natural variations and anomalies, and these do not conform to any neat geometric pattern. Furthermore, statisticians point to a cognitive bias known as apophenia, the human brain's powerful tendency to find meaningful patterns in random data. And yet the idea of a hidden order, of a lost global science, holds a powerful allure. It speaks to a deep intuition that the world is more connected and more mysterious than our science is currently prepared to admit. Whether the grid was a physical reality of energy or a symbolic reality of a shared global culture, it forces us to consider the builders. Who were these people with the knowledge, the vision, and the power to conceive of such a planetary plan? To find them, we must now look beyond the stones and the maps, and into the strange and beautiful legends of the people who called Mul their home. History has no name for this global civilization, no record of its kings, no account of its rise, and yet one name does echo down to us, a whisper from a single controversial source, the Narkel. According to the tablets that James Churchward claimed to have translated, this was the name of the people who inhabited the lost continent of Mu. They are the ghost in this grand machine, the central enigma around which all of these mysteries revolve. Churchward painted them in utopian strokes, a unified and harmonious people, 64 million strong, living in a state of enlightenment that humanity has not seen since. But as we peel back the layers of this legend, and as we compare it with the strangest anomalies in the archaeological and mythological record, a more unsettling and profound question begins to form. Were the Narkel simply an advanced branch of humanity, or were they something else entirely? Before the age of man, there was an age of giants. In the Hebrew Bible, they are the Nephilim, the mighty ones of old who walked the earth and took human wives. In Greek mythology, they were the Titans, primordial beings of immense power who ruled before the Olympian gods. In Ireland, they were the Fomorians, a race of giants who were said to have come from beneath the sea. These are stories we have long dismissed as fantasy, as the imaginative attempts of our ancestors to explain natural phenomena like earthquakes and volcanoes. But what if they are not fantasies? What if they are the fragmented, mythologized memories of a real founding race, a race of beings who were physically larger, stronger, and perhaps longer lived than modern humans, a race that Churchward called the Narration? This idea might seem to belong purely to the realm of myth, if not for the strange and persistent physical evidence that seems to support it. Our journey takes us to the arid coast of Peru, to a peninsula called Paracas. It is here that in the 1920s, archaeologists unearthed a vast and ancient necropolis containing the remains of a mysterious people. What was astonishing about these remains was not their age, but the shape of their skulls. They were elongated, stretched backwards into a conical form with a cranial volume that was, on average, 25% larger than that of a modern human skull. Furthermore, some of the skulls appeared to lack the sagittal suture, the fibrous joint that runs along the top of the skull and connects the two parietal bones in a normal human. For decades, the scientific consensus has been that these skulls are the result of artificial cranial deformation, or head binding, a practice known to have existed in many ancient cultures around the world. By binding a child's head with cloth or boards, the soft bones of the skull can be forced to grow into an elongated shape. But this explanation, while accounting for the shape, does not fully account for the increased cranial volume or the missing sutures. You can change the shape of a box, but you cannot easily increase its internal capacity. In recent years, controversial DNA analysis has been performed on some of these skulls, with preliminary results suggesting they contain mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown in any known human, primate, or animal. The researchers have even suggested that the genetic differences are so great that they would not have been able to interbreed with humans. While these findings are far from being accepted by the mainstream scientific community, they open a door to a breathtaking possibility. What if the people of Paracas were the descendants of a pure or purer Nakal bloodline, a ruling caste or a priestly class perhaps, who preserved the unique physiology of their ancestors from the lost continent of Mu? What if their elongated skulls were not the result of artificial binding, but a natural genetic trait, the sign of a mind that was biologically different and perhaps more advanced than our own? If the physical form of the Nakal was so distinct, what then of their minds, their society? Here the mystery deepens, for the world they are said to have inhabited is almost alien in its harmony. Churchward's account, supported by the recurring themes in utopian myths, describes a civilization without war. Imagine a world of 64 million people spread across a continent with advanced technology and vast resources that did not fracture into competing empires. A society that did not devote its immense energy to conquest, subjugation, and the endless cycle of violence that has defined every chapter of our own recorded history. To a modern mind, this seems impossible. It suggests a psychology, a collective consciousness that was fundamentally different from our own, a people who had either overcome or never possessed the tribal instincts for conflict and domination. Their spiritual life was said to be the source of this harmony. The Nakal, according to Churchward, did not worship a pantheon of jealous, squabbling gods as the Greeks or Mesopotamians did. They revered a single, all-pervading force, the Great Spirit or the creative essence of the universe, of which every living thing was a part. This was not a religion of faith and fear, but a spiritual science, a direct understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. We see echoes of this worldview in the surviving philosophies of many indigenous cultures. The concept of mana in Polynesia, the sacred life force that inhabits all things. The idea of prana in India, the cosmic energy that is the breath of life. The Chinese concept of the Tao, the natural order that flows through the cosmos. Are these all independent philosophical developments? Or are they the surviving fragments of a single unified understanding that was the state religion of Mo? A worldview where science and spirituality were one and the same, where to understand the laws of physics was to understand the mind of God. a race of physically distinct, potentially giant beings, a society without war, a spiritual science of cosmic unity, a perfect harmony with nature. When we assemble these pieces, the image that emerges is of a people so far removed from the human beings of recorded history that we are forced to confront the most speculative and provocative theory of all. Given their seemingly non-human physiology, their impossibly harmonious society, and their advanced knowledge of the cosmos, could it be that the Knuckle were not entirely from Earth? This is the point where our mystery intersects with the ancient astronaut hypothesis. This theory suggests that in our deep past, extraterrestrial beings visited our planet and played a role in the development of life and civilization. Across the world, the oldest myths seem to tell this very story. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, who taught humanity agriculture and kingship. The Andean people spoke of Viracocha, a civilizing god who emerged from Lake Titicaca and taught the arts of stone masonry and astronomy. The Maya and the Aztec revered Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a god who descended from the sky to bring knowledge and lore. What if Mu was the original point of contact, the first great colony, a joint venture between a nascent terrestrial race and visitors from the stars? This would explain everything: the advanced knowledge, the unique physiology, the harmonious society. The Nakol in this scenario were a hybrid race, the first children of Earth and the stars. Of course, we must anchor ourselves for a moment in the firm ground of mainstream science. There is currently no accepted genetic or archaeological evidence to support the existence of giants or a non-human race in our past. The elongated skulls of Paracas, while fascinating, are still widely considered by most anthropologists to be the result of artificial head binding, a cultural practice, not a biological trait. And the ideals of a utopian society without war are a common feature in the mythology of many cultures, likely representing a projection of our own longings for a more perfect, peaceful past rather than a historical reality. Yet the questions remain, and the anomalies refuse to disappear, so we are left with a choice of mysteries. With the Knuckle an idealized memory of what humanity could be at its best, a golden age of our own making, remembered and embellished through the long millennia? Or were they truly something other, a people whose story is not just a lost chapter of Earth's history but of galactic history as well? Every great legend has its architects. Every whispered truth has a first voice that dared to speak it. The grand and haunting story of Mole, with its sunken cities and its starborn race, did not simply survive the millennia intact, carried down to us in a pure, unbroken chain of memory. The version of the legend that we know today is largely a modern reconstruction, a magnificent and controversial tapestry woven together by the minds of two obsessive, brilliant, and deeply unconventional men. Our story begins in the latter half of the 19th century, in the sweltering, untamed jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula. This was an age when archaeology was still more adventure than science, a pursuit for rugged romantics, treasure hunters, and visionaries. And in this world, there was no figure more romantic or more visionary than Augustus Le Plongeon. He was not a conventional scholar who spent his days in dusty libraries. He was an explorer, a physician, a pioneering photographer who made some of the first visual records of the great Maya cities like Chichen Itza and Uxmal, his glass plate images capturing their pyramids still half swallowed by the relentless green of the jungle. At the time, the Maya civilization was still a profound mystery to the outside world. Their elegant and complex system of hieroglyphic writing was a closed book. No one in the modern world could read it. While mainstream academics struggled and failed, Le Plongeon, with supreme confidence, declared that he had cracked the code. And as he delved into the carvings on temple walls and the painted figures in the few surviving Maya codices, he claimed to have found a story far older and far more tragic than the history of the Maya themselves. He found, he said, repeated references to their ancestral homeland, a great island continent that had been destroyed in a terrible cataclysm and had sunk beneath the waves. They had called this land Mu. This was a radical claim that directly challenged the Egypt-centric view of history that dominated his era. Le Plongeon was convinced that the Maya were not only older than the Egyptians, but that they were the source of Egyptian civilization. His translations wove an epic and romantic tale to prove it. He spoke of two royal Maya siblings, Prince Ko and Queen Mu. He claimed to have found their tombs, and even to have communed with their spirits. In his telling, after Prince Ko was tragically murdered, the grieving Queen Mu fled the collapsing civilization of Mu, sailing east across the Atlantic with a cadre of priests. She landed, he said, on the shores of the Nile, bringing with her the sacred mysteries and advanced knowledge of her lost homeland. There in ancient Egypt, she was revered, deified, and remembered for all time as the great goddess Isis, while her slain brother became the model for the god Osiris. He sent his findings, his photographs, and his translations to the leading academic societies of his day, fully expecting to be hailed as a genius who had rewritten the story of humanity. Instead, he was met with silence, ridicule, and outright rejection. The academic establishment saw him as a crank, a fantasist whose translations were based on nothing more than wishful thinking and a flawed understanding of the glyphs. They were, it turns out, correct. Decades later, in the late 20th century, when the Maya script was finally and properly deciphered through rigorous linguistic analysis, it was revealed that Le Plongeon's translations were almost entirely fanciful. The stories of Queen Mu and the flight to Egypt were nowhere to be found. Augustus Le Plongeon died in 1908. A broken and embittered man, his grand theory of Mu dismissed as the dream of an eccentric. The seed he had planted, however, did not die with him. It simply lay dormant, waiting for more fertile ground in which to grow. That ground was found decades later in the mind of a man whose story was, if anything, even more incredible than Le Plongeon's. His name was James Churchward, a British-born adventurer, soldier, and wanderer. Churchward found himself stationed in colonial India in the late 1800s, a land steeped in ancient traditions and guarded secrets. According to his own account, during his time there he befriended a high-ranking temple priest, a wise old man who saw in Churchward a spirit worthy of trust. This friendship, Churchward claimed, became the key that unlocked the history of the world. One day the priest led him deep into a temple sanctuary and revealed an object that no outsider was meant to see. From a hidden recess he brought out a set of ancient tablets. They were not made of heavy stone but of a sun-baked clay composite, making them surprisingly light. Their surfaces were covered with lines of intricate symbols, a form of writing unlike any script Churchward had ever encountered. The priest explained that these were the legendary Narration tablets, written in the Naga language, the original tongue of all humanity. It was a language so ancient, the priest said, that only 2 other men in all of India could still understand it. These tablets, he insisted, told the story of the lost motherland. Fascinated beyond measure, Churchward made a bargain. He would spend years, however long it took, learning the cryptic language from the priest, and in return, he would dedicate his life to preserving and sharing the story they contained. And so for years he labored over the cryptic symbols, memorizing their curls, dots, and spirals, until he claimed to have mastered the script and could read the oldest story ever recorded. What unfolded, he later wrote, was nothing less than the first history of mankind, a detailed account of the continent of Mum. He described it as a vast land of rolling plains and great rivers, located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, stretching from the Mariana Islands to Easter Island. It was home, the tablet said, to a magnificent race called the Nagal, who numbered over 64 million and lived in 7 major cities under a single unified government and religion. The tablet spoke of a civilization whose science far surpassed our own. They had mastered agriculture, astronomy, and navigation, but most importantly, they understood the primary forces of nature, harnessing the Earth's hidden energies for power and transportation. Then, around 12,000 years ago, this paradise was annihilated. In a single night of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, the continent fractured and sank into a great abyss of fire, swallowed by 50 million square miles of water. In the 1920s and 30s, Churchward published a series of books detailing his findings, beginning with The Lost Continent of Mo, Motherland of Man. The books were an international sensation. In a world reeling from the chaos of the First World War, the story of a lost golden age of peace and enlightenment was enormously appealing. Yet, Churchward's story suffered from the same fatal flaw as Le Plongeon's. The central evidence, the Narration tablets themselves, was never produced for independent examination. No museum ever housed them. No other scholar ever saw them. They existed only in his testimony. To skeptics, this was damning proof that he had invented the entire tale, perhaps inspired by Le Plongeon's earlier work and the popular esoteric theories of the time. Thus, the modern legend of Mu was born not from an ancient unbroken myth, but from the minds of these two strange and driven men. But the legend they crafted, detailed, compelling, and enduring, would become the definitive story of Mu, its origins in these two enigmatic figures almost as mysterious as the continent itself. From the esoteric whispers of Indian temples and the ambitious dreams of 19th century explorers, our search for Mu must now turn to the hard evidence of stone. If a great motherland truly sank beneath the Pacific, reason dictates that its highest peaks might have survived the flood, becoming the lonely islands that dot the ocean today. And if this were true, then we would expect to find on these final outposts the most profound and enduring remnants of that lost civilization. There is no place on Earth that fits this description more perfectly, or more hauntingly, than a tiny triangular dot of volcanic rock in the southeastern Pacific. It is the most isolated inhabited place on our planet, a silent world of wind-swept grasslands and stark volcanic cones, 2,000 miles from any continent. We call it Easter Island, its people call it Rapa Nui, and if it is not the last surviving piece of Mu, then it is a place that holds a mystery of equal magnitude. To approach Easter Island from the sea is to witness one of the most surreal and imposing sights in the world, for along its coasts, standing like lonely sentinels against the infinite blue, are the Moai. They are colossal statues of stylized human figures carved from the island's volcanic tuff, nearly 900 of them scattered across this tiny island, their presence utterly dominating the landscape. They are not portraits in the traditional sense. They are archetypes, each with the same elongated nose, strong brow, and thin, solemn lips set in an expression of profound, unshakable tranquility. Their bodies are often buried up to the shoulders, as if they have been standing there since the land itself was born, and with few exceptions they all share one deeply unsettling feature. They stand with their backs to the ocean, their gaze fixed permanently inland, as if watching over something, as if they are not looking out for approaching ships, but guarding the very soul of the island itself. The first and most obvious mystery of the Moai is one of pure brute force logistics. The largest of the completed statues towers over 33 feet tall and weighs more than 80 tons, the equivalent of a modern diesel locomotive. These giants were carved, often in one single piece, from the rock of a volcanic crater called Rano Raraku. They were then transported for miles across the island's rugged, uneven terrain and erected onto massive stone platforms called ahu. The Rapa Nui people who accomplished these feats had no wheels, no draft animals, and no metal tools. When the first European explorers arrived and asked the islanders how their ancestors had moved these colossal stones, the answer they received was simple, direct, and impossible. They said the statues had walked. The elders explained that the priests and chiefs of old had possessed a sacred power, a spiritual force known as mana, and through chants and rituals they could command the Moai to walk from the quarry to their platforms, shuffling across the land under their own power. For centuries, this explanation was dismissed as a charming but primitive folk tale. Modern researchers proposed more practical solutions, suggesting the statues were dragged on wooden sledges or rolled on logs. Yet these theories have problems. The island's resources, particularly large trees, were scarce, and the immense friction would have required a workforce of a size that seems unsustainable for such a small population. Then, in the 21st century, archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lippard proposed a radical new idea based directly on the old legend. They demonstrated that by carefully shaping the base of a statue and using 3 teams of rope pullers, it was possible to rock a moai replica from side to side, causing it to pivot forward in a shuffling walking motion. The oral tradition of the island, as it turned out, was not a metaphor. It was a literal instruction manual. But this elegant solution, while compelling, does not entirely banish the mystery. Along the ancient, abandoned roads that crisscross the island, one finds dozens of fallen moai lying face down in the dirt, abandoned mid-journey. If the walking technique was so efficient, why did so many fail so catastrophically? The conventional explanation is that this represents a society in decline, pushing its resources to the breaking point. But the legend of Mu offers a different, more poignant interpretation. What if the Rapa Nui were not inventing a new technique, but desperately trying to remember an old one? What if their ancestors from the motherland of Mu did possess a more advanced science, a knowledge of acoustics, resonance, or levitation that allowed them to move massive stones with ease? And what if, after the cataclysm and the centuries of isolation, that knowledge was fading? Perhaps the walking with ropes was a last-ditch effort, a brute force method invented by a people trying to replicate the miracles of their ancestors, their failures littering the landscape as a testament to a science that was lost. The fallen giants in this view are the tragic symbols of a fading memory. If the moai are the island's silent physical body, then an even deeper mystery represents its lost mind. Scattered among the few surviving artifacts of the Rapa Nui people are a small number of wooden tablets covered in a beautiful and completely unique form of writing. This is the Rongorongo script. Its glyphs are elegant, flowing pictographs of birds, fish, plants, and celestial symbols carved in long lines. What makes it so extraordinary is the system of reading known as reverse bostrophodon. You read the first line from left to right. Then you must turn the tablet 180 degrees to read the next line, which also runs from left to right. This process is repeated for every line. It is a system of writing found nowhere else on Earth. By the time ethnographers arrived in the 19th century, not a single person on the island could read it. The knowledge had been completely lost, a victim of the disease, slavery, and cultural collapse that had devastated the population. To this day, Rongorongo remains one of the last major undeciphered scripts in the world. It is a letter from the past that we cannot read. Scholars have long assumed it was an independent invention, a local creation with no connection to any other writing system. But when you place the glyphs of Rongorongo side by side with the glyphs from another of the world's great unsolved mysteries, the script of the Indus Valley civilization from modern-day Pakistan, an uncanny resemblance emerges. The Indus script, which also remains undeciphered, is filled with similar-looking signs, stylized fish, bird-like figures, and abstract geometric patterns. The visual language feels hauntingly familiar. 2 great mysteries, 2 unreadable languages, born from sophisticated civilizations and separated by 10,000 miles of land and ocean. Is this a staggering coincidence? The human mind in 2 different parts of the world independently creating similar-looking symbols? Or are we looking at 2 distinct regional dialects of a single forgotten mother tongue, the written language of the Nabokol perhaps, surviving in 2 of their most distant colonial outposts, its meaning now lost to both? The mystery of Easter Island's past takes an even darker turn when we look at the society itself. The era of building the moai, the so-called Ahu Moai period, came to an abrupt and violent end. The island's oral traditions speak of a terrible civil war, a tribal conflict that led to the toppling of the statues and a descent into chaos. Out of the ashes of this collapse arose a new and bizarre religion, the Birdman cult. This was a society that had turned its back on the tranquil wisdom of the Moai builders. The new center of power was the ceremonial village of Orongo, perched precariously on the edge of a volcanic crater. Here, every year, the leaders of the remaining tribes would select a champion to compete in a brutal and dangerous ritual. The champions had to climb down the sheer sea cliffs, swim a mile through shark-infested waters to the nearby islet of Motu Nui, and wait. The first man to find the first egg laid by a tern, secure it, and swim back to the main island without breaking it would be named the Tangata Manu, the Birdman. He and his clan would then rule the island for the next year. This was not a step forward in civilization. It was a desperate fall into a state of ritualized warfare and superstition. It speaks of a society that had suffered a profound trauma, a complete cultural collapse. They had forgotten how to walk the statues. They had forgotten how to read their own sacred writing. All that was left was a brutal competition for survival, a ritual that seems like a dark and tragic parody of a once great civilization. But what caused this collapse? The most fascinating clue lies in the island's own deepest legend, the story of a great war between two different peoples who inhabited the island. They were known as the Hanau Ipi, or the Long Ears, and the Hanau Momoko, or the Short Ears. According to the tradition, the Long Ears, so named because they used decorative plugs to elongate their earlobes, were the original inhabitants, the wise and powerful builders of the Moai. They were later joined by the Short Ears, who were more numerous. For a time they coexisted, but eventually conflict erupted, culminating in a genocidal battle where the Short Ears trapped the last of the Long Ears in a ditch and burned them alive. Who were these Long Ears? Were they simply an early ruling class distinguished by a cultural practice? Or does the legend preserve the memory of two distinct races, a memory perhaps of the last pure-blooded descendants of the Nanikel colonists, a tall and wise people who were overthrown and exterminated by a later population that no longer understood, and perhaps came to fear, the old ways and the silent giants they had created? Easter Island, then, is not a simple story of a primitive people who foolishly cut down all their trees, as the popular narrative often suggests. It is a far more complex, tragic, and profound mystery. It is the story of a people clinging to the fragments of a magnificent inheritance they no longer fully understood, a people living in the shadow of their own ancestors, surrounded by giants they could no longer move, and a sacred language they could no longer read. Easter Island is a microcosm of the larger story of Mu. It is a world in miniature, a laboratory of loss, showing us not only the sublime heights a forgotten civilization could achieve, but how catastrophically and completely it could fall, and how its most profound secrets could be hidden even now in plain sight. If Rapa Nui is a final, fading echo of a world that was lost, then are there other louder echoes? Are there other signatures in stone scattered across deserts and jungles that speak the same forgotten architectural language? It is a shape that is both profoundly simple and impossibly complex, the pyramid. We have come to see this shape as the hallmark of a few specific cultures, most notably the ancient Egyptians and the Maya. But this is an illusion of our limited historical focus. The reality is that the pyramid is a global phenomenon. It is an architectural meme, an idea that appears in dozens of cultures across thousands of years and thousands of miles, cultures that should, by all conventional accounts, have had no contact with one another. The enduring question, the one that lies at the very heart of the mystery of our shared past, is why did this perfect, stable, mountain-like form arise independently in the minds of a dozen different peoples? A classic case of convergent evolution in engineering? Or is it an inheritance, a single deliberate blueprint, a piece of a master plan left behind by a single forgotten source, a mother civilization we have come to call Mu? To begin to unravel this puzzle, we must start with the two prime exhibits, the undisputed titans of the pyramid-building world. The complexes at Giza in Egypt and Teotihuacan in Mexico. On the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid stands as a monument not only to a pharaoh but to a level of technical precision that remains baffling to this day. It is composed of some 2.3 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as 80 tons, all quarried and transported and lifted with a precision that would challenge even modern engineers. But its true mystery lies not in its size, but in its encoded knowledge. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of within 3/60ths of a degree, a feat that is almost supernaturally precise. Its dimensions are said to contain profound mathematical constants. Its perimeter divided by twice its height yields a number remarkably close to pi. Its proportions reflect the golden ratio, phi, the sacred number of harmony and growth. This was not just a pile of stones, it was a mathematical treatise, a library of cosmic knowledge written in the language of geometry. Now, let us travel 4,000 years forward in time and 7,000 miles across an impassable ocean to the highlands of central Mexico. Here we find the vast, silent city of Teotihuacan, a city dominated by its own colossal pyramids, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, all connected by a grand 2-mile-long boulevard known as the Avenue of the Dead. For decades, archaeologists saw this as a magnificent but uniquely Mesoamerican creation. But in the late 20th century, researchers like Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock pointed out a stunning and deeply uncomfortable correlation. The layout of the 3 main pyramids at Giza, they argued, was a perfect terrestrial map of the 3 stars in Orion's belt. Then they discovered that the layout of the entire city of Teotihuacan, with its main pyramids and temples, also appeared to be a map of the heavens, mirroring not only Orion's belt, but the wider constellation as well. Let us pause to consider the implications of this. 2 of the greatest and most iconic sacred complexes on Earth, built by 2 entirely different civilizations, separated by an immense gulf of time and space, both appearing to be architectural replicas of the exact same star system. Mainstream history has no explanation for this. It is dismissed as coincidence, as our own pattern-seeking minds projecting meaning onto the stones. But to those who suspect a deeper story, this is the smoking gun. This is the evidence of a shared, hidden knowledge, a sacred science of the stars that was inherited by both the Egyptians and the people of ancient Mexico. An inheritance, they suggest, from a common ancestor. This is where our journey truly begins. For Giza and Teotihuacan are not alone. They are simply the most famous examples of a pattern that unfolds as we look closer at the forgotten corners of our world. Let us travel to the Shaanxi province of China near the ancient capital of Xi'an. Here, scattered across the plains, are dozens of massive earthen mounds. They are pyramids, their sharp lines softened by centuries of agriculture, but their 4-sided, cardinal-aligned structure is unmistakable. The most legendary of these is the so-called White Pyramid, a structure rumored to be nearly 1,000 feet tall, which would make it the largest pyramid on Earth. While its existence remains debated, the surrounding complex of smaller pyramids is very real. Yet they remain largely unexcavated and shrouded in official secrecy by the Chinese government, fueling endless speculation about what secrets they might hide. From China, our journey takes us to the heart of Europe, to the hills of Bosnia. Here, in the town of Visoko, a researcher named Semir Osmanagic has made one of the most controversial claims in modern archaeology. He asserts that the hills dominating the town are not natural formations, but are in fact a complex of ancient man-made pyramids, the largest of which, the Pyramid of the Sun, is taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza. He has presented evidence of what he claims are blocks of a primitive, high-quality concrete covering the structure, as well as an extensive network of underground tunnels filled with strange artifacts. The global archaeological establishment has vehemently rejected his claims, insisting the hills are natural geological formations known as flatirons. Yet the controversy itself is telling. It shows our willingness to see this shape, to find this pattern even in the most unexpected of places, as if we are subconsciously searching for the missing pieces of a global puzzle. Our final destination on this tour of forgotten pyramids takes us to Indonesia, to a megalithic site called Gunung Padang. Perched atop a hill, it is a series of stone terraces, a place long held as sacred by the local people. But recent geological surveys of the hill beneath the terraces have revealed something astonishing. The data suggests that the hill itself is not natural, but is a multi-layered, man-made structure, a stepped pyramid built up over immense periods of time. Deep within it, sonar has detected hidden chambers and cavities. Core drilling has brought up organic material from these deeper layers that has been carbon dated to as far back as 20,000 years before the present. If these dates are correct, then Gunung Padang is not just a pyramid. It is by far the oldest large-scale man-made structure on Earth, built in the depths of the last ice age by a civilization whose existence is completely unknown to history. So the pattern deepens. China, Bosnia, Indonesia, all adding their voices to the chorus of Egypt and Mexico. This global distribution forces us to ask a more fundamental question. What were these structures for? The standard answer, that they were tombs for kings or temples for gods, seems utterly insufficient to explain this worldwide, obsessive, multi-millennial construction project. Perhaps we have misunderstood their function entirely. Researchers like Christopher Dunn have argued that the Great Pyramid of Giza was not a tomb at all, but a machine, a highly sophisticated power plant designed to draw resonant energy from the vibrations of the Earth itself and convert it into a usable form of power, using its granite and quartz-lined chambers to create a piezoelectric effect. This would explain the strange acoustic properties inside the king's chamber, which is tuned to resonate at specific, deep frequencies. It was not a burial chamber, in this view, but a resonance chamber. This radical idea recasts the entire global pyramid network. They were not just monuments to the dead, but living instruments of a forgotten science. They were the functional nodes of the planetary energy grid we explored earlier, designed to harmonize the planet, facilitate communication, or tap into a form of physics based on sound, vibration, and consciousness that we have long since forgotten. They were the technology of a civilization that built not with circuits and steel, but with stone, sound, and starlight, the technology of Mu. And so we are left with this blueprint, a single repeating idea etched in stone across the face of our entire planet. Is it merely a testament to the universal nature of human ingenuity, a stable shape we were destined to invent again and again in our reach for the heavens? Or is it something more? Is it the single indelible signature of a mother civilization, a piece of architectural DNA that proves we are all the children of a single lost world? To answer that, we must now turn from the what to the why. We must ask, what catastrophic event could have shattered this apparently global civilization? What terrible trauma could have wiped its memory so cleanly from our history, leaving only these silent stone puzzles behind? Every story of a golden age, every legend of a world of perfect harmony, must, by the laws of narrative and of nature, have its fall. We have explored the silent stones and the grand theories that speak of Mua's existence, but now we must turn to its end. We must face the most important and the most unthinkable chapter in its saga. How does a world die? James Churchward, in his translations of the supposed Nakul tablets, painted a simple and terrifying picture, a single apocalyptic night of fire and earthquakes, in which the very foundations of the continent gave way, and it plunged into a volcanic abyss. It is a powerful cinematic image, but one that our modern understanding of geology cannot support. Continents do not simply sink, but this does not mean that a global civilization cannot be annihilated. The Earth is a violent and volatile planet, and its history is punctuated by catastrophes of a scale that dwarf our imagination. To find a plausible cause for the end of Mu, we must look beyond a simple sinking and into the Earth's own arsenal of destruction, and into the cold, dark skies above. Our first scenario begins not with a sinking, but with a shudder. The Pacific Ocean is defined by the most geologically active feature on our planet, the Ring of Fire. It is a vast 40,000 kilometer-long horseshoe of tectonic boundaries, a seam in the Earth's crust, where the planet's fury is most concentrated. Along this ring, more than 75% of the world's volcanoes smolder, and 90% of its earthquakes tremble. For millennia, it may lie relatively quiet, a sleeping dragon coiled around the ocean basin. But what if 12,000 years ago, the dragon awoke? Imagine a cascade failure on a planetary scale. It begins with a single colossal event, perhaps the eruption of a supervolcano in the Indonesian archipelago, a blast 1,000 times more powerful than Krakatoa, injecting trillions of tons of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere. The shockwave from this eruption propagating through the Earth's crust destabilizes the already fragile tectonic boundaries of the ring. Suddenly, a chain reaction begins. The great volcanoes of the Andes, the Cascades of North America, the Kamchatka Peninsula, and New Zealand all begin to erupt in succession, a planetary chorus of fire and destruction. The sky worldwide darkens to a permanent twilight, black with ash. Sunlight is blocked, temperatures plummet, and a volcanic winter grips the globe. Photosynthesis fails, crops wither, and ecosystems collapse. Acidic rain, thick with sulfur, falls upon the land and the sea, poisoning the very water of life. And from the ring of fire itself, a far more immediate threat emerges. The massive earthquakes and volcanic flank collapses trigger a series of megatsunamis, not just one but dozens, radiating inward from all sides of the Pacific basin. Walls of water hundreds of feet high race across the ocean at the speed of a jetliner. In this scenario, the great continent at the heart of the Pacific, is not sunk by a force from below. It is obliterated by an onslaught from all sides. It is washed over by waves so immense they would strip the land down to bedrock, erasing its cities, drowning its fields, and leaving behind nothing but a shattered, scoured ruin that the rising sea levels would then patiently, inexorably cover over. This would be a death by 1,000 cuts, a planetary siege from which there could be no escape. This terrestrial apocalypse is a terrifying possibility, but it is not the only one. For what if the true killer did not come from within the Earth at all? What if it came from the cold, silent darkness of interstellar space? Let us turn our attention to one of the most profound and violent climate mysteries in the geological record, the Younger Dryas. For thousands of years after the end of the last ice age, the Earth was gradually warming. The great ice sheets were in retreat, and life was flourishing. Then, around 12,900 years ago, something happened. Suddenly and catastrophically, the warming stopped and reversed. In a geological heartbeat, temperatures in the northern hemisphere plunged back to near-glacial conditions. This was not a gradual cooling. It was a climatic snap, a sudden and brutal return to winter that would last for over 1,000 years. For decades, scientists struggled to explain this event. Then a new and radical theory emerged, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. This theory proposes that around 12,900 years ago, the Earth passed through the debris stream of a large, disintegrating comet. A swarm of fragments some miles wide slammed into our planet, with the largest pieces striking the North American ice sheet. The resulting cataclysm would have been almost biblical in its scale. The initial impacts would have released more energy than all the nuclear weapons on Earth combined, instantly vaporizing millions of tons of ice and rock. This unleashed the first and most immediate agent of destruction, the flood. The instantaneous melting of the ice sheet created a freshwater flood of unimaginable volume, a torrent of water greater than all of the Great Lakes combined, that raged across the North American continent and poured into the oceans. This sudden, massive influx of fresh water would have disrupted the ocean currents that regulate our planet's climate, shutting down the Gulf Stream and plunging the world into a new ice age. This event provides a stunningly plausible scientific basis for the great flood myths that are found in nearly every culture on Earth. But the flood was only the beginning. The impacts would have thrown trillions of tons of debris into the atmosphere. As this material rained back down, the friction would have heated it to incandescence, turning the sky into a broiler and igniting continent-spanning wildfires. Across North America and Europe, Geologists have found a thin, dark layer in the soil dating to this exact time, a black mat rich in charcoal, soot, and the telltale signatures of an extraterrestrial impact. Microscopic diamonds, melted glass ferrules, and elevated levels of iridium. The world was on fire. And for those who survived the floods and the flames, a new horror awaited. The immense cloud of dust and smoke from the fires, and the impact would have created an impact, blotting out the sun for years, even decades. This sudden, lightless winter was the final blow. It caused the extinction of more than 75% of the large megafauna of the Ice Age. The woolly mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the dire wolves, all vanished. It was a true planetary reset, a great forgetting. A global, high-tech maritime civilization like Mu would have been uniquely vulnerable. The mega-tsunamis generated by the impacts would have scoured their coastlines, and the subsequent collapse of the global climate would have destroyed their sophisticated agricultural society. The fall of Mu in this scenario was simply one part of a much larger global extinction event. These two scenarios, one from the Earth and one from the sky, are both grounded in scientific possibility. But there is a third scenario, a more unsettling one that comes not from geology or astronomy, but from the most ancient and sacred texts of humanity. What if the destruction of Mu was not an accident of nature at all? What if it was deliberate? Let us turn to the ancient Sanskrit epics of India, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. These are not just religious myths. They are vast histories that describe events of a staggering scale. They speak of great wars between powerful dynasties, but they also speak of a war in the heavens, a conflict between gods and demigods, fought with flying machines called vimanas, and with weapons of unimaginable power. The texts describe the effects of these weapons with chilling, almost modern precision. They speak of the weapon of Brahma, an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns that rose in all its splendor. They describe how its use caused the winds to turn foul, the seas to boil, and the bodies of the slain to be so burned as to be unrecognizable. The survivors' hair and nails fell out, and the land was poisoned for years to come. For decades, these passages were seen as poetic hyperbole, but after the dawn of the atomic age in 1945, they took on a terrifying new meaning. The descriptions read like an eyewitness account of a nuclear detonation and its radioactive fallout. What if these were not just stories? What if, as the legends of the Nakul suggest, they were a civilization of immense, almost godlike power, a civilization that had unlocked the secrets of the atom 12,000 years ago? In this scenario, the destruction of Mum was not a natural disaster. It was a war. Perhaps it was a terrible civil war, a conflict between factions of the Nakul themselves, fought with technologies that shattered their own continent and poisoned the planet. Or perhaps, and this is an even more chilling thought, the destruction came from outside. If the Nakul were a hybrid race, a celestial experiment, as we speculated earlier, perhaps their creators decided that the experiment had gone horribly wrong. Perhaps humanity had become too powerful, too arrogant, or too dangerous, and the decision was made to perform a planetary cleansing, a surgical strike from the heavens to erase their creation and start again. The destruction of Mu, in this view, was a deliberate, quasi-divine act of genocide, the memory of which survives as stories of vengeful gods and fire raining from the heavens. So we are left with a tapestry of trauma, three terrifying scenarios for the end of a world: a planet turning on itself in a cascade of fire and flood, a killer from the cosmos, a comet that brought an age of ice and darkness, or a deliberate act of war, a civilization undone by its own terrible power. Perhaps the truth incorporates elements of all three. A cosmic impact could have triggered the cascade of volcanoes, and the survivors might have remembered this compound disaster as a war with the angry gods of the sky. Whatever the ultimate cause, the result was the same: a global cataclysm that shattered the first great civilization of mankind, a great forgetting from which we are only now beginning to recover. Let us now step back from these two opposing paths and see if a deeper truth, a more complete story can be found in the space that lies between them. What if the legend of Mu is not a single clear photograph of a lost continent? What if instead it is a magnificent mosaic, a work of art created over millennia, from the shattered, brilliant pieces of 100 real histories, 100 real traumas, and 100 real migrations, all cemented together by the enduring power of human memory? This is the mosaic theory, an idea that does not seek to debunk the legend, but to understand its heart. To see this mosaic, we must first look at the individual tiles from which it was made. Let us begin in Southeast Asia during the depths of the last ice age. At this time, so much of the world's water was locked up in immense glaciers that the sea level was nearly 400 feet lower than it is today. What is now the scattered archipelago of Indonesia and Malaysia was then a single, vast, continuous landmass, a tropical continent larger than modern India, known to geologists as Sunderland. It was a world of sprawling rainforests, wide meandering rivers, and fertile coastal plains teeming with life. And it was a world inhabited by human beings. For thousands of years our ancestors lived and thrived in this lost paradise. But as the Ice Age ended and the great glaciers began to melt, the seas began their slow, inexorable rise. Year by year, generation by generation, the ocean crept inland, swallowing the plains, turning valleys into seas, and transforming the great continent into a broken chain of islands. This was not a single dramatic cataclysm, but a slow-motion apocalypse that unfolded over centuries. It was a real world lost to a real flood. The memory of this drowned homeland, passed down through countless generations of seafarers, would have been the first and the greatest tile in the mosaic of Mu. Now let us travel to another ocean, to another drowned world. Let us look beneath the cold grey waters of the North Sea. Here, too, during the Ice Age, a great plain connected what is now Great Britain to the mainland of Europe. This was Doggerland, a landscape of gentle hills, marshes, and forests, home to herds of mammoths and the Mesolithic hunters who pursued them. Like Sunderland, Doggerland was slowly consumed by the rising seas, but its end was far more violent. Around 8,200 years ago, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway triggered a catastrophic tsunami that swept across the last remnants of this land, drowning it in a single devastating event. Here then is another tile for our mosaic, another real memory of a homeland swallowed by the waves, this time with the added trauma of a sudden violent end. And the tiles keep coming. The oral traditions of the Polynesian people themselves, the greatest navigators of the Pacific, are filled with stories of ancestral homelands like the mythical Hawaii that sank beneath the sea as a result of divine anger or great storms. These stories may be the distant memories of real geological events, such as the collapse of volcanic islands or the slow sinking of coral atolls, events that are common in the volatile Pacific. From the Americas, the myths of the Aztec tell of their origin in a land called Aztlan, an island in a lake from which they migrated. The legends of the Andes speak of a great flood that covered the land around Lake Titicaca. From Mesopotamia to the Hebrew Bible, the story of a world-cleansing deluge is one of the oldest and most powerful in the human record. How do these separate real memories, the slow drowning of Sunderland, the tsunami that ended Doggerland, the volcanic collapses in the Pacific, the river floods of Mesopotamia, all merge into one great legend of a single lost continent called Mu? This is the patient, creative work of human memory and oral tradition. Imagine ancient seafarers, the inheritors of the Sunderland memory, traveling and trading across the oceans. In a distant port, they hear a local story of a great flood. They recognize the familiar themes of loss and survival, and in the retelling, the two stories begin to blend. Over hundreds and then thousands of years, as these stories are told and retold, they shed their specific local details. The name Sunderland is forgotten. The location of Doggerland becomes vague. The stories merge. The many drowned lands become one great archetypal drowned land. The many different ancestors become one noble founding race. The Natical, and the many different monuments and achievements of unconnected cultures, the pyramids, the megaliths, the navigation techniques, are retrospectively attributed to this single imagined source. To see the legend of Mu as a mosaic is not to diminish its power. In fact, it enhances it. It transforms the story from a dubious and unprovable historical claim into a profound and legitimate human archive. The legend of Mu, in this light, becomes one of humanity's oldest and most important stories. It is the collective mythologized memory of our entire species' long, difficult, and often traumatic relationship with the rising seas at the end of the last ice age. It honors the real histories and the real traumas of countless ancient peoples, instead of erasing their individual achievements and attributing them to a single mythical race. The true heroes of this story are not the fictional Nagal, but the real Mesolithic hunters of Doggerland, the real seafarers of Sunderland, and the real Rapa Nui, who carved their grief into the stone of Easter Island. And this interpretation carries with it a powerful and urgent resonance for our own time. As our own glaciers melt, as our own sea levels begin to rise, we find ourselves facing the same threat that our distant ancestors did. The low-lying islands and coastal cities of our own world are now at risk of becoming the drowned lands of the future. Our descendants, thousands of years from now, may tell their own myths of a great global civilization from the early 21st century that was lost to the waves, a time of legendary cities called New York or London or Tokyo. We are, in a very real sense, living through the events that are creating the next chapter of the Mu legend. And so the story of Mu finds its most beautiful and enduring form, not as a lost continent of stone and soil, but as a continent of memory, a symbolic motherland built from the real sorrows and the real triumphs of our scattered ancestors. This is why the legend feels so true, because in its heart, it is a testament to what we have survived. James Churchward and Augustus Le Plongeon were not fabulous in the simple sense. They were men who were listening to a real, ancient and powerful echo, but they mistook the sound of a great chorus for a single voice. They found the brilliant, shattered tiles of the mosaic, and in their passion and their eagerness, they believed they had found a single, unbroken stone. The legacy of Mu, then, is not buried beneath the waves of the Pacific. It lives on within us, in the stories we tell to make sense of our past, in the monuments we build to defy our mortality, and in the persistent universal dream of a world more ancient, more wise and more unified than our own. In the literal world of geology and genetics, the great Pacific continent of Mu, as imagined by James Churchward, likely never existed. The Earth's crust has no great scar to mark its passing. The map of our own DNA tells a different story of migration, one that moves from the continents to the islands, not the other way around. The stones remain silent, the bones do not confess, and the ocean floor keeps its basaltic secrets. In this sense, the case is closed. And yet, the story refuses to sink. It persists with a strange and beautiful resilience, proving that some ideas are immune to the cold, hard facts of the world. The legend of Mu endures not as a fact in a textbook, but as a powerful and immovable presence in our collective imagination. It has become something more than a failed hypothesis. It has become a continent of memory, a symbolic motherland that speaks to our deepest and most universal longings. It represents a dream of a golden age, of a time before our world was fractured into 1,000 competing tribes and nations, a vision of a unified humanity living in harmony with itself and with the planet. Perhaps the enduring power of the legend is that it functions as a perfect mirror. When we gaze into its deep and mysterious waters, we do not see a lost civilization. We see ourselves. We see our own profound desire for a shared origin, for a single unifying story that can bind us all together as one family. We see our own modern anxieties reflected in its apocalyptic fall, our fears of climate change, of rising seas, of a civilization so advanced that it risks bringing about its own destruction. and we see our own innate and wonderful curiosity, our need to believe that there are still great mysteries left to be solved, that the map of our world is not yet complete, and that there are still wonders waiting to be discovered just beyond the edge of our knowledge. So, as the gentle waves of our story recede, and the profound quiet settles around us, the question of Mu is no longer mine to ask, but yours to dream upon. Whether it was a continent of stone or a continent of memory, its purpose for us has been served. Real or not, it has brought us here together to explore one of humanity's most enduring mysteries. But now, as our journey comes to its gentle close, perhaps we can see that this was never the most important question. The more profound question is why the story endures at all. In the literal world of geology and genetics, the great Pacific continent of Mu, as imagined by James Churchward, likely never existed. The Earth's crust has no great scar to mark its passing. The map of our own DNA tells a different story of migration, one that moves from the continents to the islands, not the other way around. The stones remain silent, the bones do not confess, and the ocean floor keeps its basaltic secrets. In this sense, the case is closed, and yet the story refuses to sink. It persists with a strange and beautiful resilience, proving that some ideas are immune to the cold, hard facts of the world. The legend of Mu endures not as a fact in a textbook, but as a powerful and immovable presence in our collective imagination. It has become something more than a failed hypothesis. It has become a continent of memory, a symbolic motherland that speaks to our deepest and most universal longings. It represents a dream of a golden age, of a time before our world was fractured into 1,000 competing tribes and nations, a vision of a unified humanity living in harmony with itself and with the planet. Perhaps the enduring power of the legend is that it functions as a perfect mirror. When we gaze into its deep and mysterious waters, we do not see a lost civilization. We see ourselves. We see our own profound desire for a shared origin, for a single unifying story that can bind us all together as one family. We see our own modern anxieties reflected in its apocalyptic fall, our fears of climate change, of rising seas, of a civilization so advanced that it risks bringing about its own destruction. And we see our own innate and wonderful curiosity, our need to believe that there are still great mysteries left to be solved, that the map of our world is not yet complete, and that there are still wonders waiting to be discovered just beyond the edge of our knowledge. Let the arguments and the evidence dissolve. Let the mystery dissolve into wonder, and let that wonder be the final gentle current that guides us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in this vast, mysterious world. The ocean keeps its secrets, and tonight, so may we. What do you think? Could there have been a lost civilization like Mu, or is the legend itself more powerful than any historical truth it might contain? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the depths of ancient mystery, please subscribe to Simply About Earth for more explorations into the questions that connect us all. Until next time, keep wondering.